internet! Welcome back. Welcome back to the channel, to Covey. Isn't this exciting? Gosh. In this video, I will be conducting a small character study on one of my favorite movies ever, Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. This video comes shortly after me finishing the Mark Manson book, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. So I'll be incorporating various themes and topics from that text into this video. This is a film adaptation of Brian Lee O'Malley's 6-book graphic novel series, and it is characterized by, and known for, its unique stylization. Filled with quick, creative editing, dazzling visual effects, literal onomatopoeias, as well as just brimming with pop culture and video game references, there's a lot to love here. All except, one might argue, its characters. The characters in this movie seem all wrapped up in their own problems, their own desires, and their own feelings. The film Scott Pilgrim vs. the World is about an unemployed lowlife in his early 20s, lost in his own heartbreak, who meets the literal girl of his dreams.
Am I dreaming?
However, in order to be with her, he must defeat all 7 of her evil exes, each of them brimming with their own personalities and different powers. And that's pretty much the whole plot. Now, before I continue, I know this movie came out 10 years ago, but I just gotta say, spoiler warning, I will be talking about the ending of the movie in this video, so if you have not seen Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, and for some reason it's still on your watch list, go watch it first, and then come back to this video. Throughout the film, the various trials the characters must overcome are merely products of these characters' own problems and their failure to address them directly. Ownership of these problems and the acceptance of being wrong will finally set these characters free. It is no coincidence that the film and books are both caked with nostalgia and retro throwbacks to video games, music, and pop culture. This directly mirrors the notion that Scott, Ramona, and her evil exes are fundamentally holding on to their past, whether they realize it or not, and are unable to grow until they let go. Ramona has a past that she is supposedly trying to run from, but it keeps catching up to her. This is partially because she can't quite let go of Gideon, her big ex that she cannot get over. And Gideon's mind control chip is representative of that feeling, of still being attached to someone who you've cut ties with. Furthermore, look at the other exes that she's dumped and left behind just because she's so afraid of getting hurt herself. I mean, they literally haunt her love life because of the sudden nature of their breakup. It's also because the exes are so butthurt themselves that the League forms out of some revenge plan against Ramona. This is organized, of course, by Gideon himself. Even Scott shrivels up every time he hears the name of his big ex, Envy Adams.
Envy? Oh shit.
Both Scott and Ramona are infected by slivers from each other's past. And until they learn to open up and acknowledge their demons, their relationship will continue to be plagued. It doesn't help, of course, that Scott's kind of an asshole. In fact, all the characters in this movie have their issues. The evil exes can't handle that a girl they liked dumped them. Steven Stills is insecure about their band's reception and success. Even Scott's own sister and her friend seem engulfed with gossip and the need to be seen as cool by knowing everything about everyone.
You're right, I should send out a mass text about this. Bye.
Ramona is ultimately afraid of getting hurt, leading to her commitment issues and her leaving anytime any sign of complication hits. She is unwilling to deal with the consequences from her actions. So of course, she fails to take responsibility for any of the aftermath, aka the evil exes. Knives, ironically the youngest character in the cast, actually seems the most mature of the bunch. At the end of the film, she recognizes the faults that have brought about this chaos and violence, and ultimately helps Scott to defeat Gideon and even sends Scott to go be with Ramona, the girl that they both know is where Scott's heart lies. Knives is still only 17 though, so she is still perplexed by natural teenage distractions and high school gossip, which Scott clings to every word of, since he himself is desperately trying to live in the past. Scott's mind is still living in his high school years, craving a simple relationship, which he lives through Knives as they go to the arcade, library, and discuss school drama together. Despite his immaturity, Scott is also extremely self-centered. While this can be picked up on in the movie through Scott's detachment from his sister, bandmates, and relationships, this is highlighted even more in the book series, as he can barely even relate to anyone on a personal level, or even remember what's going on in the people's lives around him. Unless it directly affects him or his love life, Scott really doesn't care all that much about anything. This quality, of course, poisons his relationships throughout the story and isolates him further. Additionally, any negative memories of guilt or responsibility are buried deep within Scott's psyche, as he tries to forget that he can be a dick sometimes.
That time with Lisa?
That was a misunderstanding.
That time with Holly?
That wasn't what it looked like.
That time you dumped Kim?
Okay, me and Kim are all good now, all right?
Or a lot of the time. This spawns the problem that deep down Scott feels like he's not good enough for Ramona, and that he needs to defeat all her evil exes in order to feel comfortable enough with himself. Gideon is actually a very similar character in this regard, only even more self-oriented. He views people as objects, serving the only purpose of making him money or raising his social status. This character trait makes sense, as he is Scott's main rival in the story, but they both show very different forms of self-absorption. So now that you feel shitty about all of the movie's characters, let's talk about why they're so shitty, and how come they're so strangely relatable. It's because all of the characters are wrong. They're wrong about everything. And the more they continue to be wrong, the more they will continue to get hurt. Oh yeah, and you're wrong about everything too. Which is why you feel so damn empathetic for these asshats. Manson's law of avoidance says that the more something threatens your identity, the more you will avoid it. Basically, if something threatens how you view yourself, either negatively or positively, you are going to avoid that thing like the plague. We are all definitely more comfortable just how we are, which is why so many people are resistant to change. However, our mind's memory and perception are incredibly inaccurate. From false memory syndrome to the day-to-day inaccuracies of the human brain, we all indulge in mental alteration to a certain degree in our lives. Taking these 2 points together, one should be able to understand the nature of growth and character. In order to change and grow as a person, one must not only be willing to face life's adversities head-on, but one must also accept that they are fundamentally wrong about who they see themselves to be. That who someone is ultimately defined by how they are perceived externally. This is totally out of the person's control, and thus is defined by actions rather than words or thoughts. It's also why people's views of their own identities are so different than how they are perceived by others. This is a dissonance that often yields anxiety and unhappiness. Now, back to the movie. This is embodied by Scott as he fails to see the way he crumbles his various relationships, some suddenly and some over time. He's convinced he was the victim in the way his last serious relationship ended, and so he uses knives as an escape to a simpler time, reverting back to his high school self and living in the past.
You want to keep going?
I think.
Scott has a one-tracked mind, and he forgets the ways he hurts the people close to him in order to distract himself from his feelings of guilt. And really, he should be confronting them head-on to address these issues. Although painful and uncomfortable, this is the only way that Scott or his relationships will be able to heal or grow through previous trauma. Ramona is no better off, as she constantly refuses to take any responsibility for her situation with the evil exes. Out of fear of getting hurt, broken down, and having to rebuild, she has dumped every guy she's been with to avoid complications. This, of course, has spawned a lineup of evil exes ready to take revenge on the girl that hurt them and control her future love life. Scott sees these exes as direct obstacles to him, and while they may present themselves as such in a literal sense, they are, in reality, manifestations of Ramona's baggage and failure to open up in a real relationship. This is a result of Scott's self-absorbed mindset, and now that he has victimized himself, he must follow through and defeat the exes, as well as come to terms with his own vices and insecurities. Scott's sense of certainty and entitlement he feels about being Ramona's boyfriend is obviously a misjudgment, as his main line of reasoning for them to be together is that she is literally the girl from his dreams. This exemplifies the fact that the more certain you are about something, the more you endanger yourself to being wrong about it. So to constantly question one's own intuition or gut feeling is the best way to be a little less certain of yourself and view the world more objectively and correctly. This happens little by little with each fight in Scott Pilgrim's journey. With each battle, whether he knows it or not, Scott is fighting off his own insecurities. After his initial fight with Matthew Patel, which Scott won through brute force and good fighting, the physical battles grow more and more difficult, and Scott finds himself failing at conventional methods of defeating these exes. Eventually, through battles of egos, wits, music, and teamwork, Scott slowly acquires the tools he needs to defeat Gideon. For example, When battling Exes numbers 5 and 6, the Katinagi twins, Scott must perform with his band amp to amp against the aggressors. This is a battle of musicianship, community, and endurance. After getting blown off the stage by the sheer force of the twins' sound, Scott pulls his band together one last time to kick the shit out of their dual dragon rivals. Scott overcomes his insecurity of playing with his band, proving to his friends that they can succeed as a group and proving to himself that he may, after all, be deserving of his dream girl. At the end of this scene, Scott also earns an extra life, paving the symbolic path for him to earn the power of self-respect at the end of the film. As much as Scott learns, or doesn't learn, throughout the film about himself and relationships, it ultimately takes his own inevitable failure and death to see that he was, in reality, wrong the entire time. In his first quarrel with Gideon, Scott earns the power of love, and he is taken surprise by Knives, who is hiding out, waiting to pounce on Ramona for hurting Scott.
You pay for what you did to him.
Now, with Knives at the scene, Scott is literally forced to confront his mistakes he made when dating both girls at the same time, but unready to actually admit to his faults, he's taken off guard while he is distracted by the girls and is killed by Gideon. And this step is necessary in the development of Scott's character. While every other ex was concerned with fame, attention, or money, Scott literally confronts death in the face in order to move past his problems onto what really matters to him. He feels the weight of loneliness bearing down on him, and at last understands the meaning of it. The inevitability of death, now clear and true to Scott, reveals how important it is to be self-respecting first and foremost, and that to be self-respecting, he must confront and atone for his vices and wrongdoings, even if it is an uncomfortable process. Now, Scott finally understands how he created an evil ex out of Knives, and even an evil ex out of himself. After his death epiphany, and after deploying his extra life, Scott no longer wants to fight Gideon for Ramona, but he wants to fight Gideon for himself, because he knows that when he defeats Gideon, it will be 100% Scott's own responsibility to build a meaningful relationship with Ramona, and defeating Gideon, along with the rest of Scott's demons, is the path to doing just that. Scott is granted here the power of self-respect.
Scott earned the power of self-respect.
He uses this power, as well as previous knowledge of Knives' whereabouts, to call her out before she surprise attacks, and Scott is able to reconcile his wrongdoings with the two women. He explains how he cheated and he was too scared to hurt one or the other, when in reality, he hurt them both way worse in the long run, and he was really just scared to hurt himself. Having come clean and faced this adversity dead on, Scott is now closer in touch with himself as well as his relationships. He wins over Knives to fight alongside him, and ultimately defeats Gideon and moves on to the actual final battle. Nega Scott is the literal embodiment of the consequences of Scott's actions throughout the film. Not only must he fight himself because he is an ex, but also because it is the only way he'll be able to confront his vices and mistakes, move past his insecurities for good, and truly enjoy the fruits of his relationship with Ramona. The fact that they didn't even fight, but just talked and shot the shit, is a beautiful illustration of the process of examining one's own values and predispositions. It may seem scary, surreal, and impossible at first, but if you just tackle it head on, it will surely be way more simple, easy, and beneficial than you ever could have imagined. And now, thanks to Scott's epiphany and coming to terms with his past and the way he lived his life, both Scott and Ramona are free from the ghosts of their past that were holding them back, and can move on with each other without having to worry about being followed. All of this similarly reflects how we as humans view our own problems, and how we need to simply view them from a place of external critique and self-honesty to solve them. Yes, this is a story about relationships, baggage, accepting your partner's past and experiences, as well as overcoming jealousy. But it's also a story about understanding the consequences of one's own actions, about coming to terms with vices and altered perceptions of the world, and accepting these qualities to be able to work to expel them. And look, we're all crazy in our own way, which kind of makes everyone normal in their own way, right? I'd say that Scott Pilgrim vs. the World exemplifies this throughout its various fights and cross rivalries. Because everyone's got these vices. Everyone. And we're all screwed up to a significant degree, even if you don't realize it. I promise. But recognizing and understanding our own missteps and misconceptions is the quintessential step to understanding each other. And that's life. If it seems like it's you versus the entire world, it's probably just you versus yourself. And that's all I have for you in today's video. What did you think of it? Do you like Scott Pilgrim versus the World? Not a fan of the movie? Did you think my psychology was bullshit? I want to hear your thoughts, and I want to discuss all this down in the comments. Alright, I'll shut up. Go eat a hamburger, or actually, no, eat a turnip. Eat a turnip, those are way healthier. And you know what to do. Like right there, subscribe right there, and I will see you all in the next video. Peace.